Have you ever felt like the past isn't just a memory, but something that can reach out and grab you? For Marcus, Elijah, and Naomi, three siblings scattered by a painful history, the past wasn't just knocking it, was serving them a summons. Marcus is the oldest. He's the calm one, the anchor, living a quiet life, deliberately steering clear of the family drama that wants to find them. Elijah, the middle child, is all sharp intellect and ambition. It's building a world for himself that has no room for old ghosts. And then there's Naomi, the youngest, whose observant eyes see more than she lets on, carrying the weight of unspoken family secrets. They live separate lives, connected only by a past they've all tried to outrun. But you can't outrun a shadow, especially one that has your name on it. It starts with a single piece of mail. A thick, cream-colored envelope lands on Marcus's doorstep. It's an official court summons, but the strange part isn't just that he's being called to court. It's the date on the document. The case is 20 years old, and the case name bears their family surname. The problem is, none of them filed it. It's a legal impossibility, a ghost on the court docket, a case that shouldn't exist. The summons is a magnet, pulling the estranged siblings back together. For the first time in years, Marcus, Elijah, and Naomi stand in the same room. The air is thick with old tensions and questions they've never dared to ask. Why now? Who would file a case in their name from 2 decades ago? Reluctantly, they agree to go to the courthouse. They have to know what this is about. They have to face whatever this phantom from their past is. The courthouse is a grand old building, its stone walls echoing with the weight of 1,000 stories. But from the moment they step inside, something feels off. The huge clock in the main hall is frozen, its hands stuck at 3:15. In the clerk's office, they see stacks of files, but none of them have case numbers. They're just blank manila folders, waiting. The court staff the clerks. The bailiffs, they all seem to look at the siblings with a strange familiarity, a flicker of recognition in their eyes, as if they were expected. It's unsettling, like walking into a play where everyone knows their lines but you. They're led to a courtroom deep within the building, dust motes dancing in the slivers of light from the high windows. The judge, an old man with eyes that seem to hold a century of secrets, looks down at them from the bench. He speaks in a low, solemn voice, not of a new trial, but of an old one, a case that was sealed and left unfinished 20 years ago. Their family's case. The judge speaks. A young court clerk approaches the siblings ostensibly to hand them a file. But as she passes Naomi, she leans in and whispers her name. Just Naomi. A single word spoken with a chilling intimacy. But they've never met. No one in this courthouse should know Naomi's name. A cold dread begins to creep up their spines. They exchange a glance, shared silent acknowledgement that something is terribly wrong here. They feel a constant sense of being watched, not just by the people in the room, but by the building itself. The walls seem to have eyes. They say nothing, afraid of what might happen if they break the strange, unspoken rules of this place. That night, they retreat to a sterile hotel room, the day's bizarre events hanging heavy in the air. Sleep is impossible. Naomi, restless and haunted by the clerk's whisper, starts going through the documents they were given. Tucked inside an old leather-bound legal book, she finds something that wasn't meant for them. A hidden transcript, pages yellowed with age. She recognizes the handwriting immediately. It's her mother's. Their mother, who passed away years ago, whose death was the very thing that shattered their family. Her hands tremble as she reads. It's a court record, but it's written like a diary, filled with fear and frantic warnings. It details a legal battle, a secret her mother was fighting to keep buried. But it's the last page that makes Naomi's blood run cold. The final entry, written in a shaky, desperate scrawl, reads, "If my children ever come to court," it means the truth escaped. Suddenly, it all clicks into place. The frozen clock, the knowing glances, the whispered name. This isn't just about an old case being reopened. The summons wasn't a call to start a trial. It was a notification. The case never ended. And they're not just spectators, they're the main exhibits. The siblings look at each other, the full, horrifying realization dawning on them. The case has found them, and it has already begun. What was the truth their mother tried so desperately to bury? And what happens when a court case becomes a sentient hunter seeking its final verdict? We thought it was just another case file, a dusty old mystery we could solve. Marcus, Naomi, and I, Elijah, were just three siblings trying to make a name for ourselves, digging through public records at the courthouse. We stumbled upon a case from decades ago. It's intriguing because of one thing: a key witness who had vanished and was later declared legally dead. We figured that was the thread to pull, the loose end that would unravel everything. But we were wrong. So wrong. I remember the moment everything changed. I was outside, taking a break, and I saw him, sitting on a bench across the street, plain as day. The same man from the old photographs in the case file. The witness, the one who was supposed to be dead. My blood ran cold. When I told Marcus and Naomi, they didn't believe me at first. But then they saw him too, from the window. And that's when we noticed that someone else was watching us. A figure in the distance, always there, just at the edge of our vision. The feeling of being watched never left. That's when the strange things started happening. It was like the case was seeping into our lives, poisoning our reality. Marcus, the stoic one, started hearing things. The sharp, heavy sound of a gavel banging down, echoing in empty rooms when he was home alone. It would jolt him awake at night, the sound so real, so final. We tried to brush it off as stress, but we all knew it was something more. Naomi, she started having these vivid, terrifying dreams. She was on the witness stand, a bright light in her eyes. A prosecutor grilling her about a crime she couldn't remember committing. She'd wake up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding, the words "I swear to tell the truth" stuck in her throat. The dream was the same every night, getting more intense, more real. She felt like she was losing her mind, haunted by a memory that wasn't hers. And me, I got the phone calls. Every single night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., my phone would ring. The caller ID? It just said courthouse. When I'd answer, there was nothing but static, a dead, chilling silence that felt heavier than any words. After the third night, I stopped answering, but the calls never stopped. 3:17 a.m., on the dot. Every single time. It was a digital ghost, a relentless reminder that we were trapped. We were terrified. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a curse. We decided to pull out, to tell the court we couldn't continue. We went to the presiding judge, an old, cold-faced man who looked like he was carved from stone. We explained everything, the weird events, the feeling of being watched, the dead witness. We begged him to let us go. He just listened, his face betraying no emotion. When we finished, he leaned forward, his voice low and devoid of any warmth. He said, "You don't leave a case like this. A case leaves you." Those words echoed in our minds as we left his chambers, a death sentence disguised as a legal opinion. We were stuck, and things only got worse. The next morning we went back to the archives, hoping to find something, anything that could help us. The files had changed, literally, overnight. Pages were different. Testimonies were altered. Names were replaced. It was impossible, but it was happening. And then we saw it. A new document, inserted neatly into the file. It was a formal accusation. Marcus found it first, his face going pale. He just pointed, unable to speak. I read it over his shoulder, my heart stopping. Naomi leaned in, and a choked sob escaped her lips. There, listed as the primary accused, the main suspect in the decades-old crime, was a name we knew all too well, our mother's name. The world shattered. We were just staring at the page, the ink seeming to mock us. Our mother is the woman who raised us, who tucked us in at night, who we loved more than anything. As an accused criminal, it was unthinkable. We stumbled out of the courthouse in a daze, the weight of this new reality crushing us. Spent the rest of the day in a blur of shock and grief. How could this be? Why would she never tell us? Later that night, sitting in our silent living room, Naomi finally broke the silence. She remembered things, small things, from our childhood that never made sense. Our mother's sudden trips, her hushed phone calls, the way she would sometimes just stare into space with a look of profound sadness and fear. She always told us she was protecting us, but we never knew from what. Now we did. She had been hiding this secret, this dark chapter of her life from us, for us. She had carried this burden alone to keep us safe. In that moment, our fear turned into a grim resolve. We looked at each other, the same unspoken promise in our eyes. We had to honor her sacrifice. We had to survive this. We would not speak of this to anyone. We would bury the truth, just as she had. We would play their game, whatever it was. Silence was our only shield. Survival was our only goal. A week passed in tense silence. We thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. We were wrong. This morning, a letter arrived, an official court summons. It was thick, heavy paper, with the official seal of the court stamped in black wax. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single page. A new court date had been scheduled. My eyes scanned down to the bottom of the page, to the line that read defendant. My breath caught in my throat. I showed it to Marcus and Naomi. There, in cold, clear printed letters, was her name. Our mother's name? The trial was set to begin next month. Our mother was the one they were putting on trial, even though she's been dead for 10 years. The day we returned to court felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy with an oppressive silence that clung to the velvet seats and mahogany walls. It was the same room, but everything had changed. The faces in the gallery were strangers, their eyes cold and empty, with no record of their presence in any official documents. Even the judge, a man we'd seen before, seemed altered. His features were sharper, his gaze distant, as if he were a caricature of his former self, aged decades in a matter of days. The whole scene felt like a half-remembered dream, a distorted reflection of reality. We were here for the next hearing in our mother's case, but it was clear this was no ordinary trial. It was something else entirely. The proceedings began, but not with the usual legal jargon. Instead, a tape was brought forward, its existence a complete surprise. The clerk pressed play, and the courtroom filled with the sound of static, then a voice. Our mother's voice. She was confessing, taking the blame for a crime she couldn't possibly have committed. We sat frozen, listening to her weave a story of guilt, every word a dagger to our hearts. But then the tape continued, and the truth, raw and terrifying, began to unravel. Her confession was a shield, a desperate act to protect us from the real culprit, powerful official whose name was whispered. In the darkest corners of the city, a man who operated above the law. As the last words of the tape faded, a chilling realization settled over us. This courtroom wasn't a sanctuary of justice. It was a vault, a heavily guarded fortress designed to protect secrets, not to reveal them. The solemn portraits of past judges lining the walls seemed to watch us, their painted eyes holding a century of buried truths.
Ow!
The entire system, the very foundation of what we were taught to believe in, was a sham. We were no longer seeking justice for our mother. We were trapped in a web of deceit, spun by forces far more powerful and dangerous than we could have ever imagined. The trial wasn't about right or wrong. It was about maintaining a carefully constructed lie. That's when the truly bizarre things started happening. The room, already tense, began to twist and warp around us. Faint whispers echoed from the empty jury box, repeating fragments of testimony from past trials, ghostly voices of the accused and the condemned. I saw shadows flicker and dance along the walls, elongating into grotesque shapes that didn't belong to anyone in the room. A stack of legal documents on the prosecutor's table suddenly rustled and flew into the air, scattering like a flock of startled birds, though there was no breeze. Then, the sharp, definitive crack of a gavel echoed through the hall, but the judge's hands were perfectly still on his bench. The very fabric of the courtroom seemed to be unraveling, haunted by the ghosts of its own forgotten verdicts. Suddenly, in the midst of this supernatural chaos, the judge let out a choked gasp. His eyes, which had been glazed over and vacant, widened in what looked like pure terror. He clutched his chest, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the dark wood of his bench. He tried to speak, but only a strained, wheezing sound came out. Then he slumped forward, his body collapsing onto the desk with a heavy thud. The courtroom fell into a stunned, absolute silence. As a bailiff rushed forward, the judge lifted his head one last time, his voice a dry, rattling whisper that carried to every corner of the room. The verdict, he rasped, his eyes locking onto ours, was never delivered. Then he was gone. Panic erupted. People were screaming, scrambling for the exits, but the heavy oak doors wouldn't budge. We were locked in. In the confusion, a figure materialized beside us, seemingly out of nowhere. Cloaked in shadows, Their face was impossible to see, but their voice was low and urgent. "This court is a hungry place," they hissed, their words cold as the grave. "It feeds on secrets and seals them with sacrifice. The only way to close this case, to end this cycle, is with blood." Before we could ask what they meant, they melted back into the frantic crowd, leaving us standing there, our hearts pounding with a new, more profound dread. Blood? What did they mean? Blood? The chaos eventually subsided, leaving us alone in the echoing silence of the locked courtroom. The judge's body had been removed, but a dark stain remained on the polished wood of his bench. We stood there, caught between two impossible choices. Do we expose the truth? Do we shout the official's name from the rooftops and risk not just our own lives, but a war with a shadow government that clearly controlled this place? Or do we stay silent? Do we let our mother's name be forever tarnished? Her sacrifice a secret we carry to our graves just to survive. It felt like choosing between a quick death and a slow one. Every instinct screamed at us to run, to hide, but the doors were still sealed shut. As we stood there, frozen by indecision, we heard a noise from outside. A low, rhythmic chanting began to build, coming from the hallway beyond the courtroom doors. We peered through the small, barred window in the door and saw them. Figures, dozens of them, were gathering in the corridor. They were dressed in strange, formal attire, their faces obscured by shadows or elaborate masks. They weren't police. They weren't lawyers. They were something else, something ancient and terrifying. Their presence felt like an omen, a silent jury assembling for a trial far older than the one we had just witnessed. The tension was unbearable, a physical weight pressing down on us. They were waiting, but for what? The air grew cold, and the last of the afternoon light filtering through the high-arched windows faded, plunging the courtroom into an eerie twilight. The whispers returned, louder this time, weaving a symphony of forgotten pleas and unheard cries. Just as we thought the silence couldn't get any deeper, a voice boomed from the empty judge's bench. It was the judge's voice, yet it was not. It was amplified, disembodied, echoing with the authority of generations. It filled every inch of the vast room, seeming to come from the very walls around us. "The court will decide who survives," it declared, the words hanging in the air like a death sentence, and who becomes part of the past. The courtroom felt like a pressure cooker, every tick of the clock amplifying the tension. Marcus, Elijah, and I stood before the judge, our hands clammy, our hearts pounding a frantic rhythm against our ribs. This was it, the final session. The air was thick with unspoken words, heavy with the weight of our family's legacy. Then the judge, or whatever it was behind those dark, knowing eyes, slayed out the choice. It wasn't a legal option. It was a cosmic ultimatum. We could reveal the entire, unvarnished truth, every sordid detail we had uncovered, and risk our lives at the hands of the powerful forces we were about to expose. Or we could seal the case forever, walk away with our lives intact, but leave our mother's name eternally stained, officially guilty of a crime she never committed. Marcus's jaw tightened. Elijah's gaze fell to the floor, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The choice felt impossible, a cruel game where every outcome was a loss. For a moment, silence was the only verdict. I looked at my brothers, at the years of pain etched on their faces. I thought of our mother, her unwavering strength, the sacrifice she made to protect us. She had faced down monsters for us. How could we do any less for her? The fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but a different feeling was rising to meet it, a fierce, burning resolve. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of dust and secrets, and stepped forward. "I'll speak," I said, my voice trembling but clear. The judge's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. "My name is Naomi, and I need to tell you what really happened." The words started as a trickle, then became a flood. I told them everything. How our mother hadn't committed any crime, but had discovered one. She had stumbled upon a high-ranking official, a man with immense power and no conscience, in the middle of a terrible act. She knew he would silence her, so she did the only thing she could think of to protect us, her children. She created a diversion, took the fall for a lesser fabricated crime, and became a shield. She sacrificed her name, her freedom, her entire life, just so we could have a future. As I spoke, a strange energy filled the room. This courthouse, I explained, wasn't just a building of law. It was a supernatural hub. Pocket dimension created to contain and conceal evidence that was too dangerous for the real world. A place where inconvenient truths were buried, not in filing cabinets, but in the very fabric of its existence. The missing witness from the original trial. He wasn't just missing. He was silenced, absorbed by this place, another secret swallowed by the shadows to protect the powerful. The moment those words left my lips, the world began to unravel. The courtroom started to dissolve around us, the polished wood of the witness stand turning to smoke under my hands. The rows of benches flickered like a dying candle flame. Piles of case files stacked high along the walls suddenly burst into ethereal, silent flames. The paper turning to ash without heat, the ink vanishing into nothingness. The whispers that had haunted the corners of this place grew to a crescendo, then faded into absolute silence. The shadows that danced and writhed in our peripherals pulled back, retreating into the walls until there was nothing left but a blank, empty space. We were standing in a void, the three of us clinging to each other. Then, a voice, disembodied and final, echoed through the emptiness. It was the verdict. Our mother's name was cleared. The siblings were exonerated. The case was closed. And just like that, the illusion shattered completely. We found ourselves standing on a dusty, abandoned lot, the morning sun warming our faces. There was no building, no courthouse, just an old fence and overgrown weeds. We checked the public records later. The courthouse we had spent weeks in, the one that held our fate, had never existed. It was a ghost, a memory, a story that only we could tell. Tears streamed down our faces as we hugged a messy, cathartic embrace of relief and grief. The danger was over. Our mother's sacrifice had not been in vain. We had finally brought her justice. We stood there for a long time, watching the sunrise paint the sky, a new day dawning for our family. Justice was served, but the court was never real. Some truths vanish, but some always find you. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe for more.